in the chat as they come in. So good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many people joining us, and from all over the state. So welcome to the Heights Coalition for Public Education panel on the Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit. My name is Tony Thayer, and I will be moderating the panel this evening. I'm a resident and parent in the Cleveland Heights University Heights School District and a volunteer member of the Heights Coalition for Public Education Steering Committee. And I'm delighted to see so many people here and more people coming in all the time. So welcome to all of you. A little housekeeping first. This is a webinar, so you won't be able to see other audience members. You can see me and the other panelists, and you can control, when I'm sharing slides, you can control where the faces appear on your screen, but otherwise we are controlling who you see when, based on who's speaking. And we cannot see you, but we can see the chat. And so my associate, Joan Spurl, is in the chat and will be providing links for you, answering any questions, helping the chat move smoothly. We will also have a Q&A at the end of the panel. So in your Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen, there's both the chat and the Q&A buttons. The Q&A we will use at the end of the evening, but if a question comes up for you while people are talking, you can go ahead and drop that in the Q&A, and then we will look at them when we get to that portion. And if Joan sees things come up in the chat that looks like they would be good questions for the panel, she'll direct you to put them in the Q&A. Joan is sharing a virtual program for tonight's panel in the chat. That's being dropped in both as a link to a PDF and a link to a view-only Google Doc. And you can go ahead and click that link if you want. It has some more information on tonight's panelists and a lot of resources for how you can become more involved. And she'll drop that in a few times as we're getting started, and then she'll drop it in at the end, and we'll also give you a link to the Heights Coalition for Public Education page on the lawsuit resources at the end of the evening. Like I said, it's a webinar. We have the chat. Many of you are introducing yourselves. I encourage people as they come on to say hello. Let us know what school or community you are joining from. And we'll kind of keep going from there. So I want to start by thanking our sponsors tonight. The Heights Coalition for Public Education has a great bunch of allies who help us sponsor a lot of our programs. Tonight, we are co-sponsored by the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education, the Richmond Heights Board of Education, Reaching Heights, the Ohio PTA and the CHUH PTA Council, the League of Women Voters of Ohio, and the Greater Cleveland and Cleveland Heights University Heights chapters, Public Education Partners, the Northeast Ohio Friends of Public Education, the Ohio Public School Advocacy Network, the Cleveland Heights Teachers Union, and the Northeast Ohio AFT, AFL-CIO retirees. So thank you to all of our co-sponsoring organizations and getting the word out about our event. I also want to thank our panelists and introduce them. We're joined tonight by 5 people involved in the Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit, which was filed on January 4th of this year, challenging the constitutionality of Ohio's EdChoice voucher program. Our panelists are representatives from plaintiff districts in the suit and members of the Vouchers Hurt Ohio Steering Committee. So our panelists are Eric Brown. Eric, if you want to say hello so people see your face.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Eric is from the Columbus City School District Board of Education, and he is a former Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. We also have on the panel Dan Heinz. Dan, do you want to say hi?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Dan is from the Cleveland Heights University Heights City School District. We have Bill Phillis joining us from the Ohio Coalition of Equity and Adequacy of School Funding. Say hi, Bill.
Well, thank you for joining us and spending part of your evening with us. Thank you.
And in addition to being with the Ohio Coalition, which is a plaintiff in the case, Bill also led the DeRolf lawsuit that in 1997 found Ohio's school funding system to be unconstitutional. So he's been working on these issues for a long time. We have Eric Resnick. Eric, do you want to say hi?
I do. Hi, everybody. And I'm just really honored. We have a lot of people participating and from all over the state. And I'm excited. Thank you.
And Eric is here from the Canton City School District Board of Education. And finally, we have Nika Slade Jackson. Nika, will you say hi?
Yes, hello, everyone. A special thank you to all the school board members who have decided to join tonight and to the community of Richmond Heights.
Thank you. And you can, like I said, you can read more about each of our panelists in the virtual program that we have links for. Joan will put those in the chat again if it's gotten too far up in the chat. So thank you all for joining us. So tonight, our goals for this evening are to provide information on the Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit, to hear some of the background about the effects of EdChoice vouchers on real districts, real schools, and students, that the people on our panel are uniquely able to share with us, and to help you, if you are inclined to help, understand how to get involved in the suit, either as a school district or how to support the efforts of this lawsuit as community members. The Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit, we'll hear a lot about it, but just as a beginning intro, the suit has 5 lead plaintiff districts, but more than 100 school districts in Ohio have signed on to the suit. And there are also 2 student plaintiffs and their family as representatives, and the Ohio Coalition of Equity and Adequacy is a plaintiff in the suit. And the Heights Coalition for Public Education is presenting this out of our longstanding commitment to public education. The coalition has been in existence since 2014. We are an all-volunteer group that has held book discussions, supported community actions, grassroots organizing, provided pro-public school information and advocacy over the years. So at the beginning, we were really a Cleveland Heights, University Heights focused organization, and we drew our members from this community, but it has grown to encompass people all over the state of Ohio. And we are really here to emphasize that our support for public education goes beyond one district or even a handful of districts, but that we are committed to public education everywhere, and that it matters everywhere, and that we should all be concerned about all students in our own district and other districts. And this pertains to how schools are funded, how schools are measured, how students are tested, and how teachers are treated as professionals. So you will have a chance, we'll give you a link to our website, and we invite you to learn more about the Heights Coalition and sign on to our position statement if you are interested. So, like I said before, we have people joining us from all over the state. We have more than 260 people registered, and I know that we have several elected officials from the state and local level, including many school board members, And I want to welcome all of you and thank you for your interest in learning more about the lawsuit. And I also want to thank and welcome all the other people here, the parents, the students, the teachers, and community members who are tuning in. So before we dive into the real meat of the program, we would like to do a quick poll to learn a little bit more about you and who is joining us. So one of my technical associates has opened a poll. And it's just for us to get a sense of what people are let's hear it for the curious citizens who are here to learn. I'm glad for all of you to be here, as well as the current and former teachers, the parents, couple of students here. Great to see you here. And of course, our elected officials.
Want me to share that with people? We're at 88%,
Yeah,
91%.
all right. So we have a good range of people here. And I think we will go ahead and get on with the show. So I'm sorry, I have. All right. All right, so we're going to begin the panel. Parents of public school graduates. Yes, thank you to the parents of public school graduates. So we're going to begin. I would like to just, I introduced the panelists before, but I'd like to give them all a chance to tell us a little bit more about themselves and why they have become involved in the Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit. And Eric Resnick, I'm going to call on you first. You've been involved in this process since the beginning. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what motivated you to work on this issue and how your interest led to a lawsuit.
Well, thank you, Tony. And again, thank you to all the sponsors of this event and to all the people who are here listening. Yeah, I was here from day one. School board members have a duty to advocate for public education, and we actually have a fiduciary duty to protect our taxpayers and our funding sources. And by the way, a lot of school board members don't know that. And for those of you who are in the future interviewing school board members who are running for office, please ask them how they feel about that. But this goes back to February of 2020. And the Ohio legislature had just passed the biennial budget, not this one, but the prior one. And they had increased the number of EdChoice vouchers exponentially from a number that were already way too high. And it was getting to a point where it was very threatening to to my school district and to really all other school districts. So I went to the Ohio School Board Association Urban Network meeting in February, and all the way down there, I was driving and thinking about what are we going to do about this? I thought about, well, why don't I throw it up as a question at the meeting and talk about the possibility of organizing a lawsuit similar to the DeRolf lawsuits that were against the state of Ohio in order to have these things thrown out. So I did that at the urban network meeting, and there were about 5 people who were interested, including, by the way, Eric Brown, whom you're going to hear from, and Joycelyn Reinhardt, who is from Dayton, who is in the audience, and also Charlie Wilson. Charlie Wilson is not on the panel, but he is a school board member in Worthington. He was at that time the president-elect of the National School Boards Association and a former president of the Ohio School Boards Association, and he's a professor of education law at Ohio State University. And Charlie said, even before we walked out of the meeting that day, he said, the person you need to talk to is Bill Phillis. He said, Bill Phillis can help make this happen. So I did. And I called Bill Phillis, and Bill was very eager to talk about it and even more eager to get involved. And pretty soon other people started getting involved, like Dennis Willard from Precision New Media, and Nick Pittner was involved. Nick Pittner is the attorney who won the DeRolf lawsuits. And we had organizing meetings. We had every Tuesday, we had a conference call, and the people on those calls range from school board members from around the state. The OEA and OFT reps were always on the call. We had superintendents and treasurers and lawyers. So some people spent their COVID lockdown time baking sourdough bread. We organized a lawsuit against the state. But Susie Kaiser, who was with us in the audience, wrote a white paper on behalf of the League of Women Voters that became really the foundation, the intellectual foundation for going forward with this. So thank you, Susie. The Canton City School District, at some point, our Board of Education passed a resolution asking the Ohio School Boards Association Legal Assistance Fund to pay for a feasibility study to see if there was even any reason to believe that a lawsuit against the state to have ed choice vouchers declared unconstitutional would be feasible. So we did that, they did that, and Bricker and Eckler did that memorandum. And pretty much we were off to the races at that time. Now, my friend and colleague Dan Heinz is going to tell you that Cleveland Heights, University Heights was the first school district to join the coalition, and he's right about that, and they have every right to be proud. The Canton City School District was number 2, and the only reason we were number 2 was that our meeting was later. But anyway, pretty soon more school districts began to join, and it looked like we were able to pull it off. So we interviewed legal firms and hired a legal team, and a little over a year later of working on the complaint and really hashing out the issues, here we are, and we filed on January 4th, and we're very proud of that. And what I really want to point out is that this was a grassroots effort that included lots of people. This is not something that just a few people get together and say, hey, let's do. It's lots and lots of people. It's grassroots. It's people with a lot of expertise, and it is a growing effort because it's the right thing to do. Every place that we've talked about this, people continue to be interested and people understand. And again, I have to give, most of the props really to Bill Phillis, who works tirelessly on this every single day. And, it has been the anchor, not just not just holding the group together, but also going out, making the pitches, and giving us the historical perspective needed to do it, and the expertise. So Bill, thank you again. And I think I'll end there.
Thanks, Eric. I like what you said about the grassroots effort. I think that's really one of the things that we wanted to feature when we were organizing this panel, was really hearing about that, what it's like to be on the ground, and all of the people that came together to make this happen. So I appreciate that language. Next, I'm gonna turn it over to Dan Heinz, who, as Eric says, is from Cleveland Heights, University Heights, which was the first district to join, and is a lead plaintiff in the suit. Dan, why was this important to you and to Cleveland Heights, University Heights?
Well, Eric really told the story very, very well. Cleveland Heights, University Heights has always been sort of considered the poster child for the damage done by vouchers. And in Cleveland Heights, University Heights, it's particularly unfortunate because it has taken one of our community's greatest strengths, which is an incredibly diverse community, which has always been home to a number of excellent private schools. And it has turned that strength and that beautiful quality into something very divisive, and something that has weakened our community. It has sort of weakened the threads that have always bound us together. Cleveland Heights, University Heights has lost more than $27 million to vouchers. And so we have been engaged on this subject for quite a while. We have made the phone calls to the legislators. We have written letters to the legislators. We have testified in front of the legislators, and they have always been so very polite and done absolutely nothing to help us. So when Eric reached out to me in March, I think that I received a text message from him, and I called him back before he probably put his telephone down. And I spent my COVID months immediatally engaged in this work. And so Cleveland Heights, the community was very, very eager, partially because of the incredible work that the Heights Coalition had done previous to that in educating our community about the damage that this program was doing to our public schools. We've had to pass a couple of levies exclusively, really, because of the damage done by Ed Choice vouchers. So when we finally pulled this thing together and it was really going to happen, the other members, as Eric said, their meeting was a little bit later than ours. But I also think that there was sort of a nod to Cleveland Heights given by the other members of the coalition early on, and saying, you kind of deserve to go first. And my colleagues on the board were thrilled with the opportunity to lead on this issue. And so that's what has motivated me and I think the district in signing on first.
Thanks, Dan. Nika, I'm going to turn to you next. Your district is also a lead plaintiff, and I think it's the smallest district to sign on to the lawsuit. What makes this process worth your effort?
Yes, so we are the smallest district, but there's such a huge and quite egregious disparity that we experience in our community. So 4 square miles, Richmond Heights, we're less than 1,000 students. We have 100 private school students in our community who receive more than $675,000 from the state in funding to educate at private schools. However, our public school district receives less than half of that amount to educate nearly 10 times the amount of students. And so that is our why. We, for quite some time, Tony, have felt in Richmond Heights like we were advocating in a vacuum almost. We were on this island, this little tiny island by ourselves. And I have to give credit to our superintendent, chief advocate, Dr. Renee Willis, as well as our treasurer, Cooper Martin, who were in Columbus fighting for our kids, testifying, telling the story. And so when we learned that the Coalition for Equity and Adequacy was gearing up for a lawsuit, we were all in. And it's not to say for boards who are listening in and wondering how do you get to a consensus, that it didn't take the work to build that consensus and to understand how to get there and why. And more importantly, really being able to get the community behind you, because that is what's most important. But thank you to Bill Phillips and Eric and Dan and those who just forged the way, because this is truly a monumental case in our time.
Thanks, Nika. Eric Brown, I'm going to turn to you. And this case is likely destined for the Ohio Supreme Court. And you're not only a Columbus School Board member, but like I said before, a former member of the state Supreme Court. So you have, I think, a unique dual perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about becoming involved in this lawsuit and what it means to you in your district? You need to unmute yourself, Eric.
I thought I'd gotten past that. Yes, good evening to all of you, and I'm very happy to see so much interest in this program. Yes, my interest is not only dual, but I think it's more perspectives than just that. I grew up in Cleveland Heights for a while, then in kindergarten, part of first grade there. Later, after graduated from Mayfield High School, I became a member of the Mayfield School Board and served 15 years. That followed my dad's 8 years of service on the Mayfield School Board, and he had been a teacher and coach. So I've got a deep interest in public schools and a great deal of support for public schools. It's what I've always believed in, as well as my daughters and my grandchildren, all of whom are public schools. In fact, my older daughter is a public school board member in Gahanna here in the Columbus area. I also have the experience of taking 15 credit hours in school finance at the Cleveland State University under the teaching of Dr. John Burke, a Cleveland Heights resident. Dr. Burke and his wife, Nancy First, who's a judge in the Common Pleas, are there. But I studied school finance. I studied the school funding system in an effort to come up with a way to improve school funding. That stayed with me and continues to stay with me. Now, I've got an opportunity after serving many years as a judge and as Chief Justice to give back and to really push and work at trying to get this lawsuit underway. And it is becoming underway. It's been filed, which is a great start. And Columbus City School District is probably a bit different than anybody else. We've got nearly 50,000 students right now, and we are by far the largest school district in Ohio. I believe it's about double the size of Cleveland School District, which is number 2. We've got more than 9,000 teachers and staff. And we have a wonderful superintendent by the name of Dr. Talisa Dixon, also an alum of Cleveland Heights University Heights School District. We have a 7-member Board of Education, unlike most school districts. And we have a very, very diverse student population. We're 53% Black, 21% white, 16% Hispanic, and lots of others. So, that makes for a unique backdrop. The data says that we're out a lot of money every year. The deduction to have paid for Ed Choice vouchers, and I'm not talking about any other type of voucher, but Ed Choice vouchers alone has been ranging from $22 million a year. $22 million a year in 2017 to last year of over $30 million. This year, of course, because of changes made in the formula, that's not the case any longer. But I think that we do recognize the harm that is done to our school district and our school children, the harm that is done to many others. And we see the trajectory that opponents of public education are doing their best, both through expansion of vouchers and also through lots of other legislation that they're putting up to destroy public schools in our state and in our country. So with that, my interest is piqued, and I'm happy to be helpful in working this through.
Thanks, Eric. And last, but certainly not least, Bill, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your driving focus on public education. You have been working on this for a long time. What has made you so committed to this, and what has made you devote your attention to this lawsuit now?
Well, at the outset, I want to say that Eric Resnick overplayed my importance in this whole effort. I'm working among giants on the steering committee, Giants in Education. I'm just thrilled to be doing so. But my concern all along, and we were thinking about doing some litigation at about the same time that Eric Resnick called me and wanted to know if we wanted to become involved. But my concern is absolutely this. I fear for the future of public education. There's a libertarian philosophy among some of the very wealthy people in this nation that would like to phase public education completely out. And in fact, their end game is to have the parents ultimately pick up the cost of educating their own children. Well, I doing this from having been a school superintendent, an assistant superintendent of public instruction, and then executive director of the coalition that obviously had the DeRolf case, coordinated the DeRolf case. And so from that perspective, and when I worked at ODE, I worked with the legislature. One of my jobs was to be the liaison between the Department of Education and the legislature. You know, after 16 years of trying to lobby for adequate funding and buildings, adequate buildings, I saw it was kind of useless, really. And so in 1992, I resigned my position as assistant superintendent, went to work for the Coalition for Equity and Adequacy of School Funding. The state has the constitutional responsibility to secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state. As a member of the state education department, I knew that wasn't happening, and the state was not going to do it unless forced to do it. And so that's why I got involved in the DeRolf case to start with, the coalition to start with. And of course, we had some success with DeRolf. 1,200 new school buildings as a result of DeRolf. The percentage of the state general revenue fund going to K-12 education was increased from 34.5% to over 40%, which it is now. And hence, that was through the courts that we were able to make that achieve, or to accrue that achievement. So I'm just really thrilled to be a part of this because it's the right thing to do. And certainly I want to encourage all boards of education to become involved in this effort. But the preservation of public education, the public common school system is my reason for being somewhat zealous about this effort.
Thanks, Bill. And we'll hear more from you later. I appreciate that. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit more about the background of vouchers in Ohio. I know there was at least one question in the chat about talking about Ed Choice vouchers. I don't know if this will answer your whole question, but I'm going to ask Eric Brown to tell us a little bit more, a brief overview of vouchers in Ohio and how the voucher programs have developed. I know that the Vouchers for Ohio lawsuit is specifically about Ed Choice vouchers, but you could kind of tell us about how that has developed. And I'm going to put some slides up on the screen also while you talk, Eric.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Vouchers have been around for quite some time. And as I mentioned, when I studied school funding, the issues of school funding have been around forever. And at least since the 70s, when I was in college studying it, it's been a major problem. And the issues generally have not changed. With respect to vouchers, vouchers first, I think, came into play in the early 1990s. And in Ohio, it was about 1995 when the very first voucher program came into existence through the General Assembly. And that was a program dealing with Cleveland City Schools. And eventually, through litigation, because it was controversial always, voucher education, that was found to be constitutional, but under very, very narrow limits, in a case called Zellman. And from there, vouchers continued. And in about 2006, I believe, the Ed Choice voucher program was created. And the initial design of vouchers and the initial thinking by many people, I think legitimately, was about helping find a different kind of education for some students who were both impoverished and in need of something different. That may have been the case, but as vouchers have evolved over the years, especially the Ed Choice vouchers, and those are the only ones we're concerned with in this particular lawsuit. They've been expanding and expanding to the point that they no longer address only financially distressed families, but anyone, whatever financial level, whether you can pay for a private school education out of your pocket or not, whether you can put it into your budget and make ends meet and take care of that, or if you're impoverished and just don't have any money for it, you can still get an Ed Choice voucher. Initially, it applied to schools that were failing, where a student was enrolled in public school and the school was failing, at least in the state's definition, but that's been taken out as well. They want, the legislature is currently working on a plan to provide vouchers for everyone. That's called House Bill 920, I think. I have
290.
Pardon?
House Bill 290.
290, that's right. Yeah. And you know, the intent now is to expand voucher eligibility to everyone, to expand the amount of money that is given in those vouchers, and to continue to escalate the attack on public schools in Ohio. Public schools are the same thing as common schools. That's what they were called in the old days, and that's the word in the Ohio Constitution. And one of the very most important concepts in all of this is that this is a constitutional challenge. Constitutional challenge to the Ed Choice Voucher Program. The Constitution, in part, says simply that the General Assembly will secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state. And that's all we're asking for, is that the General Assembly fulfill its duties and follow the Constitution. There's nobody that says that people can't go to private or parochial schools, but not to do so, Constitution prohibits them from doing so with public dollars, your tax dollars. Now, during the development of vouchers, many other things occurred. There was other litigation. And we've now got a legal framework in which we can pursue this suit. Some people claim that the Cleveland litigation gets in the way, and that's simply not true. That was a very narrow decision applying to that particular program. There are people that say that the DeRolf decisions that found Ohio's system of funding public education to be unconstitutional may get in the way. And in part, that's because even though the Ohio Supreme Court found Ohio's system to be unconstitutional on 4 separate occasions, the court ended up saying, well, they really don't have a whole lot of authority to do anything to order the General Assembly to give more money to public education, and they're going to wash their hands of it. Well, that too is a very different type of lawsuit grounded in other things, other parts of the Ohio Constitution, and it does not get in the way of what we're pursuing here. The House Bill 290 is going to do several things, that none of which are necessarily good. And it's called the backpack bill. If it's passed, as I said, every school-age child would be eligible for either $5,500 in the lower grades and $7,500 for high school students. That could be spent almost in any way they want on private or parochial education. It's going to create, it would create a true money follows the child approach, and is simply violates the Constitution in more ways even than we're having problems with right now with Ed Choice vouchers. Another step, yeah, I understand, just one more step, and that is the increasing school voucher amounts and eligibility that happened in House Bill 110. The state biennial budget dramatically increased vouchers again, and that's with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Eric Resnick, can you tell us a little bit more about why a lawsuit in particular? I think we've been sort of dancing around that question a little bit, but as opposed to other sorts of collective action that could be taken? Why a lawsuit, and why now? What do you hope to achieve with this?
Well, I appreciate that question, and I really want to keep this 100 the whole way across. And the answer, you've heard bits and pieces of the answer from every one of the presenters already. And the truth is, nobody really wants to do a lawsuit, but the reality is we don't have a lot of choice. In my 17 years as a reporter, I spent a lot of time at the State House because I covered the state legislature, and it's a very sad state of affairs here in Ohio, but it's also very true that your legislature, and this is a function as much as anything else of how we gerrymander and create districts, but the cold reality is they don't care. They don't care what we think. They don't care what we want. As someone said, they're very polite when we go down to testify. But the reality, and I learned this very quickly as a reporter covering what goes on down there, is, as long as the majority has a super majority and an agenda, once they're on a mission, everything else becomes performative. They know what they want, and they know what's going to pass even before the bills are written. So you can go down there and lobby all you want. It doesn't make any difference. You can write op-eds, and editorial boards can pan them all day. It doesn't make any difference. They're going to do what they want to do. And that's exactly what they've done in the state of Ohio, not just with this, but on the myriad of attacks on public education that we've seen over the past 25 years. To people who ask me this question, and they say, well, why can't we just go down and hire a lobbyist? Well, we all have lobbyists already, and it hasn't gotten us anything. The only thing that they are going to understand is if the court says no, you got to stop. That's it. That's the answer, and that is the truth. And unfortunately, anyone who tells you differently just doesn't really understand how things work in our state house.
Thanks, Eric. As somebody who has gone to testify in Columbus, as I know a lot of people on this call have, it's that feeling of what are you accomplishing when you go to do that is big. So thank you for that. We're going to turn to the real meat of things and hear specifically about the 5 claims of the Vouchers Hurt Ohio lawsuit. And we're going to go through them one by one. I'm going to ask each of you to tell us about one of them, and I will put up some of the language associated with that, the language of the claims as you're talking. So Eric Brown, I'm going to throw it back to you to tell us about the first count, the first claim of the lawsuit.
Great, thank you. And I'm very happy that we're now getting into the meat of this program. And the first claim is the meat of the lawsuit. The first claim is based entirely on the Ohio Constitution, Article 6, Section 2. And it's a pretty simple, straightforward claim that by creating the Ed Choice Voucher Program, the General Assembly in the state of Ohio have violated the Ohio Constitution, and they can't do that. And keep in mind that it doesn't matter in legal terms whether there's some good factors or It's all bad factors. That's not the question. The question is, does this scheme run afoul of the Ohio Constitution? And the answer is that it does. The Ohio Constitution, as I said just a few minutes ago, requires that the General Assembly create a system of common schools for all Ohio school children. And note the use of the word "a." You know, the drafters of constitutions were often lawyers. They don't write words and choose words lightly. Every comma, every period, every punctuation mark, and word that is selected is there for a reason. The word "a" is there to denote one single system of common schools. What legislature's done here is created a second system of uncommon schools. And they've allowed some students to go to those without regard to the rest of students. The Ed Choice promotes not one, but multiple systems of education. There's no provision in the Ohio Constitution to fund uncommon or unpublic schools. It's at the expense of adequately funding a thorough and efficient system of common schools. Plain and simple, the Ohio Constitution forbids it. Ohio's had this program moving for some time now, and the 2-year state budget that was just passed simply makes the problem worse. This claim is asking simply for a declaration from the court that this is an unconstitutional system. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Bill, Phyllis, can you tell us about the second claim?
Well, yes, ma'am. It's very similar to what Judge Brown has been saying. The state has failed to secure a thorough and efficient system as required by the Constitution. And as Judge Brown indicated, the words in the Constitution have meaning. Each word has a meaning. Now, for example, secure, which the state is required to secure a thorough and efficient system. Secure means defend. You know, there was a system of common schools in place at the time of the Constitutional Convention of 1850, 1851. And the word secure at that time and still means defend or protect the common school. A matter of belonging in the common school is a matter of belonging to all equally. Thorough means complete. And as the Judge Brown said, you know, they were to create one system, not multiple systems. Now, the per pupil funding authorized by the legislature has failed to keep up with inflation. That's the point we're going to make. The funding for Ed Choice has skyrocketed, whereas the funding for the public school district has been somewhat static and level. The current state budget bill exacerbates the inequity problem. And of course, we're going to point out that the fair school funding plan that was devised by Representative Cupp and Patterson, that plan was not funded as it was intended, and the Senate seems to be saying, members of the Senate seem to be saying, well, we're going to discard the Cupp-Patterson plan and put forward our own plan. Now, I've been around long enough to know that any plan that is not funded is doomed to die. It happened in the 70s, it happened in 80s and in the 90s. And the bottom line here is they've pretty much, at least the Senate has pretty much discarded the idea of the Patterson plan. And hence, we have a situation where we can't depend on the legislature to do the right thing. And that's along the lines of what Judge Brown has already said.
Thank you. Nika, can you tell us about count number 3? Claim
Yeah.
number 3.
Yes, Tony. So count 3 speaks to segregation in violation of the thorough and efficient system of common schools as provided in Article 6, Section 2 of the Ohio Constitution. And you've heard a little bit about it already regarding the fact that the General Assembly has a duty using our tax dollars or otherwise. So the framers of the Constitution were very clear. Get the money, secure the money, and the money should be used for a thorough and efficient system. And what we know about the framers' thinking is that their idea of thorough and efficient also included the idea of diversity. It was important that diversity was key in making certain that we had an informed citizenry so that we could self-govern. And all of that is clear in the Constitution. But what we've seen, though, through EdChoice is that it has created resegregation in our schools, particularly in Richmond Heights. In 2005, Tony, right around the time of EdChoice, in Richmond Heights, we had nearly 30% students who were white. The demographic of our school district pretty much mirrored the demographic of our community. During that time, we were right around 40% Caucasian community members, okay? Fast forward to today, in Richmond Heights, the school district, we have just around 3% white students. And so count 3 really speaks to the exacerbation of segregation that EdChoice has caused in our school districts. And we're not alone in that.
Thanks, Nika. Those are such gobsmacking statistics. Every time I hear you say them, it's really something to take in. Dan Heinz, will you tell us about the 4th claim? Are you there, Dan? You're muted.
There we are.
There you go.
I'm happy to talk to everybody about the 4th claim. Basically, I'm going to tell you about the law, which is very, very clear. I'm going to tell you about the loss, which is giant. I'm going to tell you about the levies, which we've all had to deal with. And then this is going to tell you about the lawsuit overall. So, you know, when you read law, it is often full of vagaries. And the Ohio Constitution in this case has none of that. It is extremely explicit. The Ohio Constitution tells us, and this is a direct quote, "No religious or other sect or sects shall ever have any exclusive right to or control of any part of the school funds of this state." Period. It's incredibly clear. And yet today, as a result of the EdChoice legislation that's currently in place, over $250 million of our Ohio taxpayer funds have been diverted to sectarian schools, to religious schools. So it is clearly a violation of Ohio's Constitution. this claim number 4 is I think a slam dunk. It will be very hard to deny that these funds are being diverted in a way that follows Ohio's Constitution. So what has this resulted in? This has resulted in a catastrophic loss of funds to Ohio's public school districts. And it's getting worse and worse. It's getting more and more pervasive. Initially, it was limited to a few school districts whose students weren't scoring high enough on a test. It's gotten to the point where now they're talking about the backpack bill. And so every district, you could also argue really that the most recent, in air quotes, fair school funding budget has dispersed the damage done throughout the entire state. So as a result, we're all going to our communities more and more often for levies. In Cleveland Heights, Ed Choice vouchers have forced us to go to the community twice. I think that I heard a statistic that about every 2 years, a third of Ohio's public school districts are on the ballot for a levy. And that is going to get worse and worse as a result of depleting Ohio's education budget through Ed Choice vouchers and then eventually the backpack bill. Eric Resnick a moment ago spoke about the fiduciary responsibility of board members. And I think that this is really critically important. And I say it like this. Here's how I interpret that responsibility. As we go out and we talk to our community and ask them to support the schools by voluntarily raising their own taxes, right, which is what a local tax levy is, we have to be able to communicate to our community members that we are willing to fight as hard to protect their tax dollars as they worked to earn those tax dollars. And this is not just a sales pitch. This is our duty as elected members of local school boards. So that's the fiduciary responsibility. Sometimes when people are talking about this claim number 4, they want to refer to the Zellman case. And the Zellman case is a previous case about the religious ramifications to Ohio's voucher system. And I want to be very clear about this because people will bring it up. The difference is, and it's a critical difference, the Zellman case was in federal court and it was involving the Establishment Clause of the US Constitution. We're in federal court and we're arguing around the Ohio Constitution, two absolutely different species. So they'll try to distract sometimes using the Zellman case, and it's just not relevant to what we're up to. So that's a brief summary of claim number 4 for the case, which is a slam dunk.
Thanks, Dan. And I think you meant that we're in state court, not federal court.
Thank you.
Yeah, unlike Zellman. Thank you. Eric Resnick, will you tell us about the 5th and final claim of the lawsuit?
Yeah, I will. And the 5th and final claim is actually, according to the lawyers, it's the smallest, but in some ways it's also very important because it really sums up why we're here. We believe that education is a fundamental constitutional right in Ohio. And the Ohio Supreme Court has never ruled on that point. And we believe that it's time for them to do so. The framers of the Constitution, the Ohio Constitution, were really clear. And in Article 6, Section 2, they talk about education is the fundamental right upon which all other fundamental rights rest. When DeRolf was litigated, Perry County Common Pleas Judge Linton Lewis stated in his rulings that education is a fundamental right in the state of Ohio, but the Ohio Supreme Court, although they never disputed his finding, they actually never ruled on it. So this is number 5 falls under what is known as the Equal Protection Clause of the Ohio Constitution. And just to put it simply, there's nothing equal about a student receiving $7,500 to attend a private high school when students attending many of the plaintiff school districts are not receiving the same amount from the state to pay for their education. Statewide, the average per pupil state funding allotted to the public school districts under the 2-year state budget is $5,149 for fiscal year 2022 and $5,526 for fiscal year 2023. Both are less than the Ed Choice voucher subsidy. And that discrepancy remains even when local property tax payments are added to many of the plaintiff school districts, which should not have to keep going back to their residents asking them to increase local taxes. And Dan, is very eloquent about that. Dan is actually one of the most eloquent presenters on that particular point. And in part, that's because Cleveland Heights really gets hit with this hard. But there's really no truth to the claim by voucher proponents that the money follows the students. In fact, private school students receiving vouchers are on average receiving more money from the state than the state is sending to the public school districts in state foundation payments. So what we have is not only a system that is not where the educational opportunities are not common, it's not common schools, but we have a voucher system that is really getting all of the goodies from the state in terms of higher payments and putting them toward these non-public school options. And we don't believe that the Equal Protection Clause in the Ohio Constitution will tolerate that.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, all of you, for explaining all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot to digest, but it's very clear explanations, and I appreciate that. For anybody who is listening who wants to go back over that in the future, the Heights Coalition will have the slides that I have been showing. They're up on our website, and also in the program for tonight, there are lots of links to, there's a link to the actual text of the lawsuit, and other resources for understanding the lawsuit and the voucher issues involved in it. So those are available to you to read and learn more about when we're done. Being mindful of time and that we want to get to Q&As sooner than later, I do have a couple more questions for the panel. Eric Brown, I'm hoping that you can just tell us briefly what the state of the lawsuit is now and what the future of it is.
Certainly, happy to do that. This case was filed, as was mentioned, on January 4th, 2022. It is still in its very, very preliminary stages. Now, Franklin County's Common Pleas Court always sets cases on a 1-year track, meaning that this case has a theoretical trial date of January 3, 2023. However, in a case this complex, this large, this important, that almost never holds, and it's far more likely that this will be on a 2-year track or something of that nature that's not been decided yet. It's not even been discussed yet. So far, what's occurred is, besides the minor things, the very minor things, like motions to extend time or motion to extend page limits. There has been a motion filed by folks with the Institute for Justice. They are a $30 million organization, a national organization, and they have filed a motion to intervene in this case, and they work solely on behalf of EdChoice. They work solely on behalf of vouchers. We've taken action to oppose it. That has been filed. The state of Ohio, who's obviously a party, weekly supports their motion, but very weakly. And next up is likely from the state, a motion to dismiss. That happens always in almost every single lawsuit, and we can expect to see that here. Beyond that, there's, again, not much. The parties are all working hard at gathering data and gearing up to be questioning each other through legal means. And that's where we are. The case has been assigned to a very good judge. Her name is Jiza Page. She's young and she's very, very bright, and she's very talented as a judge, as she was as a lawyer in practice before that. She was a Columbus City Council person, and she was in the city prosecutor's office before that. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. So my final question before we get to the Q&A from the audience is, what can school boards and citizens do? We've heard a lot about how funding for vouchers is changing. Feels like even as we sit here and talk about this, and the money going towards vouchers is increasing. What should we be concerned about, and what can people do? Nika, I'm going to ask you to talk specifically about school districts and what you would like other school district members to consider.
Yes. So, Tony, I'm so glad my friend Eric Resnick decided that he wanted to keep it 100, because the call to action is real. As far as school boards, members of school boards, what you need to do is, number one, pay attention, and number two, get in it. We know, we mentioned that there are a little over 100 school districts that have signed on, but as hard as we have worked, as much grassroots efforts that we have had so far, I'm just going to tell you, it's not enough. It is not enough. We have more than 600 school districts in this state, and we need each and every school district to sign on to this cause. I understand wholeheartedly that we are busy doing lots of things. We're hiring superintendents. We're settling contracts with teachers unions. We're doing lots of things, but listen, people, we have got to walk and chew bubblegum, because the opposition is real. They are organized, they are strategic, and there is a very real attack on public school. And I will tell you that all of the things that you are working on in your school districts will be for naught if you do not join this lawsuit and begin to push back and fight. Our backs are against the wall, and it's very simple. Join the lawsuit, get in it, raise the awareness with your communities, tell the stories, make the noise, and be diligent when you do it.
Thank you, Nika. Yeah. Bill, what can people who are not members of school boards be doing to help this effort? Briefly, we have some resources for them in our program, but give us a little rallying cry.
Well, as Nika mentioned, we need boards of education. to sign up for this effort. We have to win in the court of public opinion as well as in the court of law. And the best way to win in the court of public opinion is to have the school districts across the state to sign on to this effort. We learned that in DeRolf. We had over 550 school districts, actually 575 school districts involved in DeRolf. And I'm convinced that we wouldn't have won in the Supreme Court of Ohio if it had not been for winning in the court of public opinion. And we won in the court of public opinion because districts got involved in this effort. Boards are very key to this. This is a grassroots. It's a community by community effort. And if we don't get the board, if the boards of education are not interested, then why would we think the general citizenry would be interested in it? So Nika hit the nail on the head. We need every school board in the state to sign up. And the best thing that citizens can do is to encourage their boards to sign up. And for those districts that have already signed up, they need to encourage them to stay with it. Board members get a lot of flack from some, in some cases, they're getting flack from opponents to this lawsuit. And so we need to encourage them to stay with the effort.
And Tony, if I could just add, if you're a board that's struggling with what to do and how to move forward, reach out to any one of the panelists. Bill Phillips and Dennis Willard are willing to, via Zoom, educate your board, educate your community. Dan, Eric, and myself, we're all, especially in Northeast Ohio, if you're in Columbus area, reach out to one of us. Get the questions answered. Don't belabor the debate, within your board. Get your questions answered and move on and make the decision. And we can.
Thank you, Nika. And I want to emphasize that we have, I see lots of links being dropped into the Vouchers for Ohio website, and those are all good. And also, if you don't catch those, if you do take our program or find it on our website afterwards, which we'll send you links to when we get off this, there are links for school board members to learn about how to sign on, the steps that they need to take, and also lots of links for non-school board members to learn more, and resources for advocacy for that. So thank you both for that. All right, let's all do a little stretch. We're going to move on to the Q&A portion of the evening. I wish we could see the questioners, but we have some questions here, and I am not going to try to organize these so much. I think that will get difficult, but I do know. Thank you. Some of the panelists have indicated questions that they feel good about answering. So I'm going to start with the first question, and Dan, I'm going to throw this to you, but if other people want to weigh in, they can, but I'll start with you, Dan. And this is from an anonymous attendee who asks, what if you win, just like the DeRolf suit, and the law is considered unconstitutional, but nothing happens, just like before? In other words, what would really happen if you do win this suit?
So I'm so glad to have an opportunity to talk about this. So first of all, the DeRolf case, anybody who thinks that the DeRolf case was not effective doesn't understand the enormous impact that DeRolf has had for Ohio school children in terms of getting buildings built, et cetera, getting the amount of funds allocated to public education increased. But there's a critical difference. The DeRolf case, the Ohio Supreme Court was asked to order the legislature to do their job. This case is entirely different. We are seeking injunctive relief, meaning we are asking the court to once and for all cease payments going to Ed Choice recipients. We are asking the court to order the Department of Education and the state to stop diverting public funds through vouchers to private institutions. And so doing so after that order went into place would be a violation of a court order, and those who did it would be personally liable for the money that was spent. So it is a very different form of relief that we are seeking in the Vouchers for Ohio lawsuit.
Thanks, Dan. I imagine that this suit would receive opposition no matter what, but I can imagine that that's one of the reasons why the other side opposes it. All right, this is a question I'm going to give to Eric Resnick. How will state legislative leaders respond to this lawsuit when they are asked 2 more times by schools to fully fund the fair funding plan? So the court angle, but isn't this like biting the hand that feeds, is the question.
Well, and I thank whoever posted that question. Look, how did they respond to DeRolf? Their response was inadequate, but they did respond. They did respond by putting together the Ohio School Facilities Commission. They did respond by putting additional funds into public education. And ultimately, even though it took a very long time, you know, they did look at what is known as the Cupp-Patterson fair funding model that they passed but didn't fund. So, you know, they will have a response to this. I think what the questioner is getting asked is say, you know, if we rattle them, won't they hurt us more? Well, the reality is they're already hurting us pretty badly. And that's not going to change. You know, we have a majority in our legislature who really don't believe in public school districts. They don't believe in public education. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, you can ask them that question and they'll tell you that for themselves. So is it biting the hand that feeds you? Not really. I mean, we just want them to do their job. We just want them to quit hurting us. And you know, standing up to a bully sometimes is a good thing. And that's why we're doing this.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to jump down in the question stream a little bit. I'm able to see them a little more now and group them together. And Mark is asking, what are the other vouchers besides Ed Choice, and why are they not being included in this suit? And will they be affected should this case succeed? And I will let any of you answer that. I don't have a specific person in mind.
I can probably take it.
Okay.
There are, and Bill, you might actually know this better than I do. I think there are 4 or 5 different kinds of vouchers. Some of them are for special education. Some of them are, for very small tailored purposes. And you know, one of the things is that they are all much smaller than Ed Choice. And don't get this twisted. I don't like any of them. I think they're all bad. But this lawsuit for a number of strategic reasons, and actually Susie just put the 5 in the comments. There's the Cleveland voucher, which has already been ruled on, and we're not going to be able to touch that at all. There's the Peterson, that's for special ed. There's the autism, that's for special ed. There's Ed Choice and Ed Choice expansion. So 3 of the 5 we're probably not going to be able to touch, but those are very small when compared to Ed Choice and the Ed Choice expansion, especially. I mean, for strategic reasons, the decision was made that this lawsuit needs to be as laser focused as possible on knocking out the Ed Choice. Will it potentially spill over into the others. I don't know, it depends on what the court does with it.
Thanks, Eric. There are several questions in the Q&A that are all about what the pro-voucher advocates, how they'll challenge the suit, what kind of counter arguments do you expect the state to make, and how will people defend the vouchers? Dan Heinz, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so one thing that has been very obvious to me, remember the fact that the lawsuit was coming, had been very well known. We've been very public for over a year. And one of the things that was very interesting to me is that now that we've filed, there has been little to no sort of legal response. I mean, what you've just heard tonight are 5 claims that are locked tight, built around the language of the Ohio State Constitution. And the other side so far has presented no argument in defense of those 5 claims. Instead, they have tried to pivot into discussions around school choice, right? Their big tagline. But school choice is a false narrative. This isn't about, where students are going to go to school. The voucher schools who are receiving financial support from the state of Ohio now have almost all been here forever and a day, and they were quite successful before vouchers. So this isn't jeopardizing many private schools. It's not about where kids go to school. It's about who pays for it. And the other thing, that they've been talking about is, well, we're all taxpayers. And so we should get to determine where our taxpayer dollars go. And that's pretty weak as well, because you could say exactly the same thing about public transportation, and now you want a voucher for Uber, or you don't like your public parks, and so you want a voucher for Cedar Point and Six Flags. Public work is the public work, and public dollars should stay in the public sphere. So those are the big points so far. And if you notice again, I'll repeat, none of them are legal. And I think that's a really strong indicator of the strength of our case.
Go
If
ahead,
I could
Eric
just-
Brown.
I was going to say, if I could
Eric,
just
you
add
need-
to that, but let Eric Brown go first.
Eric Brown, if you,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
Yes, I've got it. If I could, just a couple of things. I know Dan, but all of us are very enthusiastic about the strength of our lawsuit. And that's a reality, and it counts for a great deal. I think all of you listening should be enthusiastic for a successful outcome here. However, the reality is that we have the burden of proof in this lawsuit, as anybody who files a lawsuit does. We have the burden of proof, and if we don't prevail, if we don't offer enough evidence for the judge to decide in our favor, then they win. We have to put in all of that case. Secondly, because we are challenging legislation that has been enacted by the Ohio General Assembly and signed by the governor, it has a presumption that it's constitutional. It is presumed to be constitutional, and that's unless and until we can prove otherwise. So, and when you're talking about the state of Ohio, they have, I wouldn't say the resources are unlimited, but they're huge resources, far more than we ever command. And they're going to be fighting hard against us so that they don't, so the court can't find the constitutional issue. And that's all just reality. We've got a great lawyer and a great law firm and good guys, but it's going to be an uphill fight.
Thanks, Eric. Eric Resnick, is there something else you wanted to say, or?
Well, just one little thing. Voucher schools, for many who operate them, are very profitable. So we can expect a big fight. We can expect a national fight, as the similar suits in other states have become very national. To answer the question specifically, we don't know what their legal arguments are going to be because they haven't filed an answer yet. Although I agree with Dan, we certainly haven't heard anything substantive yet. But when this really gets rolling, I mean, you can expect a lot of attempts to divert the conversation away from what is really there. And the big thing that you all who are with us can do is make sure that that doesn't happen. Keep the subject focused on what the counts are in the suit and what the actual legal arguments are, because the proponents are going to want to take it every other direction that they possibly can. That's it.
Thank you. That actually, you both brought up money, and Marcia asks, how is the Vouchers Heard Ohio lawsuit funded? Eric Resnick, you had said maybe you'd like to answer that, or I don't know, maybe Bill Phillips would like to answer that.
I can answer it very simply. The coalition membership dues is, and we have over 200 members of the coalition. The coalition membership dues 50 cents per pupil. If they join in with the voucher Hertz Ohio initiative, it's an additional $1.50. Now at this point, to get involved in this, it's $2 per pupil for those districts that's per year for those districts that pass a resolution of joinder. So the answer is $2 per pupil.
And that sounds like less than some of Eric or one of you mentioned the intervention in the suit by another organization, a pro-voucher organization, that's very well funded. It sounds like, so there's a little bit of funding disparity. But so your suit is drawing from the districts per pupil to do it. And are you accepting any other donations or financial help beyond that?
Well, obviously, we would not reject any contributions, but we're not soliciting them. This is a matter the public education community should be supporting. And, you know, when you a high school voucher, $7,500, $2 per pupil isn't very much of an investment. That's not going to cause any district to go bankrupt, $2 per pupil. When the bottom line is, this is something that the education community should be supporting, because public education is on the line. This is an assault on public education. Those people that are representing these large organizations, voucher organizations, pro-voucher organizations, they are bent on destroying public education. Bottom line, and the public education community needs to awaken to the fact that is happening.
Thank you. So there's a question here. Is there any call for retroactive restoration of damages to the public school systems? In this suit, I think, is the question, or more broadly?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that's a question for Judge Brown.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. This lawsuit does not seek any recompense for the past. What this suit is all about is finding the laws that created the Ed Choice voucher specifically, and only this voucher, to be unconstitutional and as a result illegal for funding to continue, public funding to continue. And that's all. I think it's important. You know, this is not one where you can go back and try to change things as if there was never voucher legislation to begin with.
Thank you. Another question, kind of taking us in a different direction from Jennifer, is what do you think the reasons are that public school districts are not joining the lawsuit? She finds it shocking that it's only a little over 100 out of 600 doing this so far. Do you think there are reasons why people have not signed on?
I think uninformed. Honestly, I think people have been largely uninformed and sometimes misinformed. And so that's what this panel discussion is about: raising the awareness, getting the information, and sharing it, whether it's in small bites and small groups or in large settings like this. But we've been distracted. Our backs have been against the wall, Tony. COVID is real. The lack of resources that we've had in our school districts is very real. And so we're dealing with lots of things. And so quite honestly, we've been distracted and by design, I would argue. So it's really just time for us to begin to continue to share as we're doing today and make sure that people know what to do to stay engaged.
If I can jump in also and sort of round out Nika's answer somewhat. So in Ohio, there are roughly 611 public school districts, and Ed Choice Vouchers has hit with real precision a reasonably small number of them, because they have been based on test scores, and the tests are pretty sketchy to begin with. But I want to share out a very important statistic around this. So there's around 611 public school districts. Of those, in the 2019-2020 school year, 90% of Ed Choice vouchers came from 22 public school districts in Ohio. Of those 22 public school districts in Ohio, 19 are majority minority, and I'm sorry, scratch that, majority poverty, and all 22 are majority minority. So it is a damning series of statistics from a social justice perspective, but it is also a really important number as we talk about the impact on school districts. If you're not impacted by it, you haven't been paying attention to it. Those of us who have been deeply impacted by it, we tuned into it a while back. So we need to give school districts a little bit of breathing room to get up to speed on it.
Thank you both for that. Yeah, it is. We're all very preoccupied right now, Nika, and I can only imagine that school boards, even more than the general public. And Dan, those statistics I think are really So I'm speechless, even though I've heard them before. It really is amazing how that has played out, and I do think that as the kind of pain of the vouchers in the budget is more dispersed, more people are going to be noticing that going forward. But we should all, even if we're not in those districts that have been so heavily impacted, we should all be paying attention and care about that. We're coming to the end of our time, or sort of at the end of our time. I do want to bring one other question from the Q&A because it's a very different sort of question, and I think will be of interest to people kind of looking at state politics going forward. Some of the other questions that are unanswered, we may touch on them as we finish out the program, and we definitely have resources available to answer most of them. But Molly asks a question about the Supreme Court of Ohio in particular, and is wondering how the coalition is thinking about the justices on the court now and the upcoming Supreme Court elections and new partisan rules in the election process. I don't know if Eric Brown, if you're the person to speak to that, or Bill, or anyone else.
I certainly can speak to it because I served at the Supreme Court and know all of the justices who are serving. I would urge you all to pay close attention to the Supreme Court election this year. It's going to be contested and it's going to be important. There's a justice by the name of Jennifer Berner, who's running for Chief Justice. And there is an opportunity for several other Democrats to be elected to the court. It's possible that if the Democratic Party is successful and people who agree with its values, that the court could even flip from Republican to Democrat, and it could become much friendlier to this type of litigation and to our side if it changes. If it changes by only one person, that can make a difference. So I, again, urge everybody not only to get out to vote, but to get out and vote for the Supreme Court and pay attention to who the candidates are, and please tell all your friends and neighbors to vote.
Thanks, Eric. I think that's a great question in terms of thinking about how people can be advocates. I think so often we lose track of how government works and how things play off each other, and a lot of people don't. A lot of kind of rank and file voters don't pay a lot of attention to judicial elections, even Supreme Court stuff. And so as we're all thinking about how to be advocates going forward, thinking about how our energy in one realm can affect outcomes in other realms is important. Eric Resnick.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Public education, which constitutes about 22% of the Ohio General Revenue Fund budget, basically in the last round of state elections was basically absent. Our corporate mainstream media is understaffed, doesn't necessarily see this as something that they can boil down into sound bites, and candidates generally are not asked questions about this, and they're certainly not followed up on. We had a governor's race in this state 4 years ago, and if you go back and look at it, I don't even think public education was mentioned. If you as the public want to see these issues in these campaigns, and you want to be able to hold your public officials to account when it comes to public education and what they're doing, you need to tell your news media and your reporters that this is what you want to see in this election. Because if you don't, they're going to find other things. They're going to find other little cultural issues here and there that are maybe important, but they don't mean as much as this in the grand scheme of things. And that's just the reality of the world that we're in now too, is that your media just is not going to cover this unless they see a need. So please, if you have any way to do that, make it known. And every legislative election, at least the governor's race and every judicial race in the state of Ohio, they need to be asked questions about this and how they feel about public education and what their idea of common schools means and what their idea of the Ohio Constitution, and how it all plays and how schools are treated and funded. It's all part of the picture, and you guys need to help us with that.
Thanks, Eric. So we are over time, but I was going to ask Bill Phillis to just tell us a little bit about how districts can get involved. I have a slide to put up with that. And I want to direct people again to our program, which Joan has shared several times, which has lots of links for information and advocacy opportunities for non-school board members, and also the Vouchers Heard Ohio website, signing up for their email newsletters. We'll keep you involved in that. But Bill, if you could tell us just a little bit more about how to join Vouchers Heard Ohio, and any other things that you want to tell us about how people can support the suit.
Well,
I don't think we can hear you. I'm wondering if you are not connected. I think Bill is frozen. So I have up here the basic slide for this, that there's a resolution that school boards need to pass in order to join, and agreeing to pay the $2 per pupil per year to the coalition to help fund the suit. We have a link to this in our program, and this is also directly linked on the Vouchers Heard Ohio website. So school boards who are interested in pursuing this can find that information there. And also we have Bill's direct contact information in our program, and you'll find it on the Vouchers Heard Ohio site also if you want to ask him any more questions. And I want to thank everyone for coming on to the call. I want to thank all of you panelists for sharing so much passion and so much information on this really important issue, and for giving so much of your time to not just being here tonight, but to bringing this lawsuit together and carrying it forward. As a public school parent and as a public school advocate, I am deeply thankful for the work that all of you are doing. And I want to thank all of the people who have signed in tonight to hear this webinar and learn. I think that your awareness, your knowledge, and your passion going out into the world is also very important. If you had questions that didn't get answered tonight, we will be sending out a follow-up email. And if you can't find the answers to your questions in our documents, let us know, and we'll try to track down answers for you. With that, I think that we're done. And I thank you all so much for coming. Another thing that you can do, actually, that is not directly in our program, but that we'll put up on our site, is if you live in a community and you would like to educate people in your community about Vouchers Heard Ohio, you can do this too. You can organize a forum, you can invite speakers, and get people in your community on board. So, and we're happy to actually, the Heights Coalition is happy to talk to you about how to do that if you need some help thinking about organizing in your community. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. This was fantastic. And good night.
Good night.
Thanks.